Welcome all to yet another chapter of life skills in the module 4. We are going to see today the Challenger case study as part of your syllabus of life skills in S4 EEE, EC and Civil. I am Ruzaid Abdul Rahim, Assistant Professor MBA Department of Sri Narayan Institute of Technology, Adur. Let's begin. The highlights of the session are going to be the case synopsis, key players of the case. We're going to see some questions that we can think about, and finally a video of Challenger Space Shuttle explosion that was taken on 28th January 1986. This is the picture of the Challenger Space Shuttle hours before its launch. Let's see the case synopsis for this disaster that had happened on 28 January 1986 in Cape Canaveral in Florida, where this shuttle on its 25th mission just exploded in mid-air. NASA's fleet of Challenger space shuttles started operating in 1983. STS-51-1 was the 10th Challenger mission. The launch had been postponed several times before and was finally scheduled for 20th January 1986 from Kennedy Space Center, Florida. NASA was very anxious to complete the launch due to pressure from different quarters. So there was a lot of pressure for NASA from the government of America, from the contractors, and within the NASA, the hierarchy in NASA. So they wanted to do this. It was long scheduled, this launch, because for years they were trying to launch the space shuttle in space, but this was not happening, and they had a competition with the USSR. So this was the reason that a lot of pressure was building up on this launch. The winter that year was particularly cold, and on the night before the launch, the mercury sank to 13 degrees below zero, so it was pretty cold. It was really freezing condition on that day. On the night of the 27th January, all those responsible for the shuttle were expected to check and recheck their part of the vehicle and okay the launch. So they had to look into the vehicle that was carrying the space shuttle, and all the engineers would check and recheck the various parts of the vehicle. And some engineers, though they had differing opinions that they would not okay the launch, but finally they all said okay for the launch. Alan MacDonald, an engineer from Morton Thiokol, the company that built the solid rocket boosters of the space shuttle, refused to sign the document. Now the case comes into play. Alan MacDonald, he was an engineer from Morton Thiokol, the company that built the solid rocket boosters that would boost up the rocket with the space shuttle in the air. So the person, he didn't want to sign the document saying okay for the launch, because he found that the rubber O-rings which seal the SRBs had never been tested at such low temperatures. Now, what are these O-rings? They are like a safety valve. They're like a complete sealing on the fuel, and the purpose of using O-rings is that they would seal if any leakage of gas or any propellant happens. So that is the purpose of O-ring. But Alan MacDonald, being an engineer, and he had been working on this O-rings for a couple of years, he found that the O-rings were not that capable under low temperature. They would crack and they would fail in flight, and that would lead to total explosion. He conveyed the message to his superior Joseph Kilminster and also contractor Larry Malloy of NASA. A teleconference was held between NASA and Morton Thiokol. Two engineers, Roger Boisjoli and Arnold Thompson, who had worked on the project, confirmed that the rings had never been tested under such low temperature conditions and pointed out that it might be dangerous to launch. They tried to convey the point with graphs and charts, but the management of Morton Thiokol were not convinced. NASA, too, interpreted the absence of data as consent for the launch. So Joseph Kilminster, the boss of Alan MacDonald, he overruled his interpretation and gave his okay. And Larry Mulloy in NASA was too happy to hear the decision. On the morning of 28 January 1986, in spite of all the objections raised by McDonnell, Roger Boisjoli, and Arnold Thompson, NASA proceeded with the launch, and at 11:38 a.m., the shuttle lifted off carrying 7 astronauts, including a civilian. Now, a civilian is a person who is not trained to be a NASA astronaut, but who is on a mission, and in here, they are selected by the president. And the lady who went on space as a civilian was a school teacher. Her name was Sylvia Mikuloff, and she happened to go along with them. The smoke started coming out of the SRB joint and gave way to flames. Within 72 seconds, the flames had spread to the external fuel tank. At 73 seconds, there was a massive explosion. So just a minute after the launch, the entire space shuttle was exploding and it disintegrated, killing all of the 7 people aboard. What a disaster. Challenger space shuttle disaster. Let's look at the key players. Of course, NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was involved. Morton Thikel Incorporation, the contractor for NASA. Larry Mulloy, the NASA official who persuaded the engineers to okay the launch, a lot of pressure. And Arnold McDonnell, the director, Solid Rocket Motors Project. Finally, Joseph Kilminster, engineer who was in the management position in Morton Thikel. Crew members of the Space Shuttle Challenger, the unlucky lot who just lost their lives in space because of certain decisions that were wrongly made. So the question now we have to ask is, what could NASA have done differently in the launch decision process? Secondly, what, if any, professional responsibilities were neglected, not taken into consideration, or not looked into properly by each of the key players in this case? So we have seen the key players, and we have to now think as engineers or future engineers, what were the professional responsibilities that they could have taken and taken care of in this case? So please submit your answers on edmodo.com by 25th March 2020, and we'll finish this session with the video of the actual launch.
It was a bitter cold but sparkling clear morning at Cape Canaveral. Here at the last seconds of the countdown.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
All the communications between the shuttle and mission control indicated everything was going fine. There was a sense of relief that the much-delayed flight was finally underway.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
It happened just over 1 minute into flight.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
From mission control, silence. Then the bland, chilling report.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Slow motion. A search effort couldn't begin for some 15 minutes after this. Debris, they said, just kept raining from the sky. The head of the space shuttle program had no explanations, just sorrow at the tragedy.
At 11:40 a.m. this morning, space program experienced a national tragedy with the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger approximately a minute and a half after launch from here at the Kennedy Space Center.
Computer-enhanced video shows the explosion in detail. What explosion appears to happen at the rear of the spacecraft around the main engines, perhaps in one of the two solid rocket boosters. Then a blast higher up. The shuttle was instantly a blazing fireball. NASA has appointed a committee of top engineers and scientists to investigate the catastrophe. Orders have been issued to impound all records concerning the flight, down to the personal notes of all the flight controllers. Dan Molina, NBC News at the Johnson Space Center, Houston.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
It was a bitter cold but sparkling clear morning at Cape Canaveral.